Barcelona is an amazing city. However, it is very hard to find an apartment short term or long term here. Short term in Barcelona is 11 months or less, and long term is normally 5 to 10 years, so well over a year. The biggest difference is here for long term apartments, the tenant is given a lot more rights. So it's even harder to find those types of apartments because owners are very scared of the rights that the tenant has when it comes to the apartment, whether it's not paying or staying more or really damaging it. They have a lot more rights, especially when it comes to getting kicked out of the apartment. To have a long term apartment, you need an NIE or a job contract stating you are going to be here for long term. If you are a student or on another short term visa, you pretty much cannot get a long term apartment. So you will have to find a place here to live. You definitely see a lot of what is on the news, whether it comes to being anti tourist or just hating foreigners in general, not even tourists, but people who just want to come and live here who are not from here. But you don't really see that in the apartments day to day because the people who are renting it want to make money. And that's how they make money, is renting an apartment, whether you are a tourist or just somebody else in the city. Even locals here have very hard times finding apartments. The most common way to get an apartment here is finding a room with apartments. So that could be just roommates who are all other students or people who are trying to live here or visitors, or they will have the person who owns the apartment here also living there, and then they are renting out multiple rooms in their apartment. This can be very common, especially if you rent from an individual, because then if the tenant overstays, the owner has a lot more rights if they are living there with the other people than if the other people are just there on their own. A lot of these shared rooms, there's kind of a mix of different ones. I've been to some really nice ones with 2 or 3 roommates, and they share a bathroom and a kitchen and living room. And the shared spaces, at least, are quite spacious. However, a common trend now, just to make more money, is to have a lot of people in an apartment. So what a lot of owners have done is they've taken away the living room completely and turned that into a bedroom to have an extra room to make rent. So the apartment will pretty much just be the bedrooms, normally with the desk. However, they're normally quite small, and then multiple bathrooms and a kitchen. This is definitely becoming a lot more common with room shares here to make more money off of whoever they can. And because it is so hard to find housing, a lot of people will settle for this option. However, there are some other bad options as well. I have seen listings, and other people have told me that an owner lives there and they're renting out a room or two, and the people who are coming to rent, they can't use the living room. They can't work from home because they don't want these people around very much. So they're really strict, and it's kind of mean. So you definitely want to be looking for that when you are searching for apartments online or rooms online. You also want to make sure 100% to tour the place before you pay any money up front or see it. You do not want to just rely on pictures or videos because they can be fake or they can make them look a lot better than they are. There are also 2 ways to rent apartments in Spain. It's either through the individual owner or through agencies. Agencies are definitely more common because they have the options. They're like a realtor to find you a lot of things. However, this is going to come at a cost. Agencies, on top of, in Spain, a general deposit is 2 months, which you get back at the end minus any damages. However, it is refundable. When you use an agency, their agency fees are not refundable. So a lot of agencies will charge fees of 1 to 2 months, plus the total contract amount, 20% of that for VAT taxes, value added tax. And so it can be a lot more expensive. So you will have to consider that cost when looking at a price of your apartment, because if you're just doing 11 months, then you have to do 2 months deposit plus about 3 months for the agency non-refundable. Those are extra costs you're going to have to consider. When moving to Barcelona, I would definitely recommend at least minimum 3 months rent to have up front, because even if you rent from an individual owner, you're probably still going to have to pay 1 to 2 months rent, depending on if it's just a room or an apartment. Rooms can be about 1 month deposit, and an apartment will normally be 2 months deposit. at least you'll get it back, but upfront costs, you are going to need that as well. Also, make sure whether you're only in a room or an apartment, you get some type of contract. You don't have to file it, but at least have both your signatures saying that the deposit money is refundable. I've had some people that I've known here where they gave deposit money and it didn't say that in the contract, and then they refused to give it back. So definitely make sure that's in there. Also, the length of the contract, whether it's just going to be month to month or 6 months or 11 months, or if you're lucky and get a long-term one, what the time is and when you can break it. A lot of long-term contracts, 5 years might seem like a long term, especially from people who aren't from here. But what I've heard is a lot of those contracts you can cancel after 6 months. So that is something to make sure you look for in there and to have just in case something were to come up, or let's say you have a 3-year visa, a 5-year contract, would you be able to leave that contract after 3 years and not have to pay the remaining 2 years of rent? Another big thing people notice when they come to Barcelona is the cost of the apartments. Rooms, depending on if you want to be in the central kind of main city area, you're probably going to be paying about 500 to 1,000 for a decent room. So this is one that, isn't too small. It's clean. You can use a living room, has decent lighting. Those all play factors into what the type of room is. And normally a room can be month to month rental as well. So making sure you look for that. But the cost is a little bit more. And as everyone has said, and you see online, that the cost of apartments is really going up in Barcelona. I have my own different thoughts on this. I can talk about being here for a while now, but it is getting more expensive. Now, your own apartment, if you are paying 1,000 to 2,000, that is a decent price for at least a 2-room apartment. You don't want to be paying more than 2,000 if it's only one room or you're just getting scammed. Unfortunately, I have met some other Americans here, and some of them are paying like American pricing for apartments. I mean, they were paying like what I was paying in Chicago, and it's like that's not the point of Barcelona. And you can find so many other options there. It just might take a little bit longer, but there is a market for it. Americans make a better average salary than here in Spain. I think the average salary in Spain is only about 30 or 35,000 a year versus the US. I think they just said it's about 59,000. So it's about, well over 50% more, so they can afford more. But I think if you're coming to Barcelona and you want to enjoy it and live the life, you do not need to be paying that to be in the center, unless you're in some gigantic penthouse. But even the really nice apartments here, the buildings themselves are very different. They're not amenity buildings. At least in the US, if you're paying that high price tag, you would get a pool and a gym. And there are some buildings like that, some newer ones that are kind of more on the outskirts of the city almost. But if you're in the city and you're paying a lot, you're not getting those amenities. Some of them have door people in a sense. They'll have someone sitting there during the day, but they're not checking them in like you see in the US. Most of these places, some of them will have like a small gym, but space here is so limited because the buildings are older. You're not getting a gym. You're not getting a pool. You're not getting, community spaces that all these nicer buildings in the US have, or a lot of the newer buildings. So it's definitely something to consider when you're thinking about what you're paying for rent. Thankfully, here in Barcelona, gyms are quite affordable. A big one, especially for students, is Viva Gym. It's like $10 a month. So, you can kind of take that into cost. And most of the other stuff in Barcelona is quite more affordable than it is in other countries and also in the US. But in Spain, Barcelona and Madrid are definitely the more expensive cities. So if you want to come to Spain, being in other cities are more affordable. These two cities are definitely the most expensive. When it comes to finding an apartment, also, what you really need is time, which we don't always have, but it's something to really consider. If you're coming here first and you're looking for an apartment, I would give yourself a good couple of months. If you can just find a temporary place to stay, whether it's just an okay room or an Airbnb or something, to give yourself time to find a good apartment. It takes time. You go through a lot of listings, all these apartments, they get 10, 20, 30 people looking to get in, but the owners will only choose a couple to come through. So your chances are very slim and it can take time. It took me months to find this own apartment on my own. Almost 4 months. So it definitely takes time to find something decent. You can get something quicker if you want to pay thousands of dollars a month and then have that additional up cost front as well for the deposits and everything. But definitely give yourself time if you can, and also consider when students are starting school. So the beginning of winter, like mid-January, and then also August, September, when students are coming for the fall semester. A lot of students get the short-term apartments, not necessarily the long-term ones. So those short-term ones, they go fast, they go to students, and they're normally more expensive. I think most cities that have a good summer lifestyle, which Barcelona does, it is going to be more expensive in general as well. Apartments, when I was looking here, when I first got here in August, were a lot more expensive than what I'm paying now for this place, which I got in December, because all the students were leaving and not as many tourists and people come to visit Barcelona in the winter. So that can be a better option, but of course it depends when you're moving here. But something to consider when you're looking at pricing is things will be more expensive April to about October, and then cheaper in those other kind of winter off months here. Barcelona is an amazing city with a great culture, great people, great way of life, and amazing food. It is not without its hardships, and no big city is. No big city anywhere in the world is perfect, or even smaller cities. But I think everything else you're able to experience and have here is definitely worth the hardship of what apartment hunting is here in Barcelona. And the stress of finding the apartment will be worth it in the long run. I hope you enjoyed this video and it was helpful when you are coming and looking at apartments in Barcelona. And if you have any other questions, leave them below and I will try to answer.